Kenya discovered oil in Turkana County in 2012. On Monday, President Kenyatta flagged off a tanker ferrying 200,000 barrels of oil, and that admits Kenya officially to the League of Oil Producers. But Kenya's infancy coincides with fluctuating oil market, with the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, netting oil export revenues rising to 711 billion in 2018, marking a 32% increase in 1 year. The organization is made up by the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Qatar, Indonesia, Libya, the United Arab Emirates, Algeria, Nigeria, Ecuador, Gabon, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, and the Congo. And fears arrive as Nairobi prepares to start commercial production of oil by 2022. But how does the government manage expectations, balance saving versus spending, manage medium-term revenue volatility, monitor expenditure, and set the country's economy to the path of prosperity?
By the way, vile ndugu yangu kutoka Turkana alikuwa anaongea hapa, hakutaja na hakusema kwamba wale wametupea security ya kutosha. Kwa hiyo trucks ni watu ya West Pokot. Kwa hivyo sisi tunangoja mbafu. Wewe kana mguu. Wengine waende na kichwa na ngozi na hoops na horns, lakini sisi mbafu.
Welcome back. The hashtag is News Compass. I'll be talking then to financial economist Anthony Odhiambo. Thank you for gracing us with your time. I do appreciate it. Good evening.
Good evening.
Ben Mulwa is governance expert, a regular, of course, guest for our other shows here on the other programs. But thank you, gentlemen. I do appreciate your time. Equally an important time to have this discussion. Timely, isn't it? Coming to you, Anthony, it appears from the economical perspective, it appears that there is the winding road ahead for the government to manage many things, among that the expectations, especially of the host community, where I've heard the sort of chalk and cheese argument in blocking the first exportation to the port city of Mombasa. Potentially then, if not well managed, that could lead or plunge the country into crisis. How does the government go about that?
Generally, in terms of oil, there are always so many interests involved. And many times when you have a government that only narrows into serving one interest,
yes,
then that becomes a problem. For example, if you go to Nigeria, and you'll find the Boni people, where the government never considered the environmental impact of oil exploration in that place. So you end up having an environment that is so degraded. Now, in Kenya, I'm very happy that at least for now we have a legislation that guides the way we manage our oil exploration. Now, with that, then you look at the way we are saying we are going to share the revenue from the oil, where you're saying, look, the national government is going to get 75%, the county government is going to get 20%, and then the local community is going to get 5%. Now, with that kind of scenario, then you notice then many interests are actually being taken care of. But then there's another interest that no one ever discusses. And you've just mentioned the interest of the OPEC.
Yes.
Now, when you're dealing with OPEC, what happens is that if you decide to introduce your currency, for example, deciding that, look, my oil will be bought in euros or in any other currency, apart from dollar, then the American will come in and say, look, according to agreement in 1970, all the OPEC member states must use the dollar. Then now you'll start hearing things like the Libya, the Gaddafi becoming a rogue president, the Venezuela, Hugo Chavez becoming a rogue president, just because you want to change the currency of operation in transacting in petroleum. Now, that is another interest that need to be considered. Now, as we speak now, if you ask me, we as a country and as a region need to come together and probably form a conglomerate
Yes.
so that we can speak with one voice.
All right.
That in itself will actually protect us from any other big players in the market.
All right. The crucial point, isn't it? Then that perhaps wraps up the issue of the entire oil issue and the country's economy generally, wrapping up the country's economy in immunity. But coming to you, Ben, then, here is about talking about the 5 local community, the 20 county government, and the 75 national government. While that is a well-planned ratio, mathematically good on paper, then it appears that there is a sort of shaky deal between the president, the national government specifically, and the Turkana community, especially the governor, that is Josephat Nanok, and the host community generally. How does this preservation come about here in terms of even before venturing into the market, which is so hostile at some point with fluctuating prices, put out the house into order, ensure that everything is well set before we go out and go to the international market?
Good evening, everybody. And before we delve actually into even the revenue sharing ratios, I think we need to be able to take ourselves a few steps back and try to understand critical dynamics around oil exploration, oil extraction, exportation, and even importation. For me, before I focus more on how much who is getting,
Yes.
I would be keen on some dynamics that have been a bit bothersome. Because since Talo announced that they had discovered oil in Turkana and parts of the larger northern frontier, we have not been able to, the government actually has not been extremely transparent in terms of the progress of that particular project and the actual quantities that we are working with in the long term. As we are talking today, we are in a scenario whereby we are actually transporting the oil from the field,
Yes.
a whole 800, close to 1,000 kilometers by road, just to try to fill up a tanker in Mombasa for exportation for purposes of refining to bring it back into the country. Now, in my view, that brings in or brings out a very critical component of sustainability and viability.
Yes.
Because we may be excited about a discovery, and I think it is really a good thing as a country to have such a national resource that we can explore. I think it is really a good thing because it would mean economic fortunes for all of us. But in my view, there is so much that actually is being kept from the public domain in terms of the viability, in terms of the sustainability. Okay. Because Ayub, let me point this out to you. Right now, we've only been able, since the president flagged off
since
the president flagged off the first consignment of oil to Mombasa from Turkana. That was actually June 2018. So it means in a whole year, we've only been able to raise 200,000 barrels. To me, that does not make economic sense. So either there is a scheme somewhere to manipulate or to try to raise the stakes of the Kenyan economy in the international market by pretending or looking like we have oil to export, or there is no capacity actually to extract the oil as it ought to be.
All right.
Those are the primary concerns I would want first to
you have mentioned
address.
Important point. Before I come to Anthony, let me then quote this here because it's in line with that and the same worries which are equally fronted or echoed by the World Bank. I quote the World Bank. It said, the biggest but most important challenge is to build and maintain good institutions. A quote within the quote itself, it said, sunlight is the best antiseptic. In other words, transparency will be the most powerful lever for accountability. If Kenyans know exactly how much oil is being produced, how much royalties oil companies pay, this will already be a major step in the right direction. But it appears that you have mentioned equally the government shrouding the process in secrecy.
There's no clarity at all. Even when we talk about these particular ratios, you remember very well the CS
John Munyes.
Energy, Petroleum, John Munyes, categorically stating that actually the contract that they have have signed with on matters concerning the exportation of this oil for refinery will not be made public. If indeed it is a genuine process, and if indeed we have a resource that can really contribute significantly to this economy, why would such contracts be a very confidential affair? So before even the governors, and even before we start exciting the people of Turkana,
yes,
and by large also the people of Kenya, I think there's need for clarity in terms of actually what are we projecting when we are setting off on this project. What is the viability? Yes,
just
yes,
to add on that. See, there's a rule of thumb in terms of oil exploration and selling of the oil. And many times there are certain things, if you don't have it, then you start having this saying that whether discovery of oil is a curse or is a blessing.
All right.
One of the things that must be there is that you must have proper and strong governance structures.
Institutions, that's what the World Bank mentions.
Of managing the oil. Secondly, there must be clear transparency that any contract that is signed, it must be brought into public, because who are you signing it on behalf? It is the public, it is the Kenyan. So if you start having contracts which are under the table, then there is a problem. Then another thing that has to be avoided is corruption, because once you avoid those three things, then you are unsafe. But if you keep them, what will happen, then people start talking. Then disagreements start coming in. Then because there are too many interests involved, people want to buy cheaply on the black market, then you find rifts started coming, people started fighting. Then the price that should have been selling in the market, then you find yourself selling in the black market at a cheaper rate.
Right.
Then that becomes a total mess.
Okay.
But then there's something also that I need to talk about, because people are saying, look, why export, then import? Now, and we have, at Changamwe, we have a refinery machine. One of the things that it's disappointing that we basically have mismanaged the Changamwe refinery machines. And for a long time, we really neglected them. So as we speak now, if we want to operationalize the refinery, we will actually spend around 1.2 billion shillings. If we are to build a new one, we'll spend a new one. We'll spend around $7 billion US.
Okay.
So that in itself is very costly. So as we speak now, where we are really at a pilot stage. We must test all the options that are available. We've realized we cannot refine this internally, so let's try and export and see how much are we going to get.
All right.
So once we do that, then we'll now see what is it that we need to do to make this economically viable. Because in terms of even transporting that oil from Turkana to Mombasa.
Yes.
One of the things that you will spend around 63 billion US dollars to do that. The income that will come is around 34 billion US dollars. Basically, you're making a loss to the tune of 29 billion US dollars if you are to run it as it is.
All
so
right.
the other thing is, let's build up the infrastructure, but let's look at this as a pilot stage, not like this is a viable business.
Okay.
We still don't even know the capacity of the oil that we have right now.
Well, the projections, according to Talo, is about 4 billion barrels available. But again, further exploration can reveal more. Again, later I'll come on the big screen because there's a graph that clearly explains where we are. There is no exponential growth at the moment because we are not commercially producing that, but we are just at the discovery point, and that is just for the test of the financial market, especially in the oil market across the world. But coming to you, Ben, here.
Yes.
Let me just pedal back our memories and vividly recall what the president did say on the 28th of December 2018 when he met the members of the press at the Mombasa State House. He said when he was requested to produce the document by my colleague who works with the National Media Group, Mark Masai, he said, I'll do that, don't worry. That will be available document. It will be in the public domain soon. He has never done that.
Absolutely.
Again, the fear is that here, the petroleum bill, which was expected to give a legal backing to the production project, has been stuck in Parliament since February 2019. It's a repeat experience after a similar one befell the bill in 2015. Does this again create a sense of transparency being absent from the onset now that we are at the embryonic stage, and do we need to adapt that in order to avoid veering off the road again later, complaining about inefficiency?
Ayub, one of the biggest tragedies we have in this country is that we have individuals in government who are always looking out for their personal and individual benefits out of anything they undertake on behalf of the people of Kenya. That's the biggest tragedy. So The reasoning behind even the delay of the bill in Parliament is because there is a push and pull between interested parties. There are individuals who believe that this process or this legislation must only come to life after our interests are covered, after we have protected ourselves sufficiently. The president, as you indicated, actually committed to produce this document. That was in December. Now it is 8 months down the line. It's almost a year down the line. The CS recently was on record insisting that this document will not be made public. So that tells you that there is quite a bit of dishonesty around the entire project. Because even as we are, to challenge what Anthony has posed here, when we are looking at, this is like at the test level, to be able to establish the viability and all those things. There's a field in science called research. And there's a field in science where we do project analysis, so that by the time even anybody puts their dollar, a single dollar into any project, they have a good understanding of the actual viability of any project. So far, we have been receiving bits and pieces of information that are mostly not coherent to be able to convince Kenyans that we have a viable project. We don't want a scenario whereby we are destroying our tarmac roads for the next couple of months with heavy traffic all the way from Turkana. Then 6 months down the line, we are told, you know what, guys, sorry, we thought we had enough oil. We can't run government or public projects based on feelings and thoughts. It has to be backed by research. It has to be backed by facts. Once the government comes out clean on these particular provisions, then Kenyans, believe you me, Kenyans will be excited actually to join this league, because it is a transformative, it has a transformative impact on our economy.
All right, and of course, pointing to economic diversification, a lot of points regionally, internationally. I'll come to that later after this short commercial break. Anthony and Ben, thank you. We'll still be on set. After coming back from the short break, we'll also take a look at a breakdown by scholarly paper that details how the revenue that is shared between the county government, the host community, and the national government is mathematically broken down. Take a look at that graph. Come into the second segment, sample your tweets, and of course, as we head towards the end tail of the program here on News Compass, continue sending in your tweets. The hashtag is News Compass. Stay tuned. Thank you. Let me get your thoughts before I come back here and have the final, of course, head into the final minutes of the program. Before I get to your tweets, allow me to just showcase for my, of course, audience and equally my panel. Now, this is an example of an oil project timeline. The exploration and appraisal that was run in 2012, that is in Turkana County. The development process, of course, here again takes some time before the infrastructure is established. Now, at this point, then we are here, not yet grown, but this is the exponential growth. Then this is the optimum level, and then that will be the cascading down, which equally contains rather the continuous production on whether there will be sustainability and continuity, the decline on the negative end, of course, which will not be good for the economy, and the abandonment, the economic limit, that is if all is not well managed. Now, mathematically, let's take a look at perhaps what the legal framework is. Of course, it's there, what the Constitution does say, but this bill has been in Parliament. Nothing substantial out of it yet ever since February 2019. Members of Parliament have not worked on that, but equally, they have unsubstantively debated the sugar report, which Kenyans, of course, are not sure whether it contains mercury, copper, or lead. Well, that is subject for another day, gentlemen. Let me just bring in some breakdown revenue. This is the optimum scenario, taking into account then the scenario of $70 per barrel, considering the first oil is projected for taking production outlook in 15 years. Not our case, but this is just a worked out formula. Say in a 5-year profile period, $70 per barrel, that is about 7,000 Kenya shillings, 2,400, that is assumed in the minimum production rate per barrel. and the cumulative revenue comes to $325 million over 5 years. Then, in terms of the breakdown, the national government goes away with 75%, the county government 20%, the community, the host community, goes with 5%. Assume it's 220 million, then that's about $165 million, about 16.5 billion Kenya shillings. And then the county government does pocket about $44 million. That is about, at the maximum $220 million, about 22 billion Kenya shillings. That is Turkana County government's budget for 2 financial years. And then the host community, maximum 220 million, minimum 11 million, meaning maximally it can pocket 22 billion Kenya shillings if this is all, of course, managed. So it's all about how the government is going to be going about that. So let's get to your tweets then here on the program. It's flooded. Let's get here. Vincent says, News Compass, if Kenyans know exactly how much oil is being produced, how much is paid in royalties, this will be a major step in the right direction. Of course, he wants positivity out of that. Isabella says, Kenya, it appears, has not learned from its peers that have made wild success of their natural resources. Of course, we'll point to South Sudanese case. Someone understands oil economics. Please tell us why not sell that Turkana oil here in Kenya. Anthony did raise that matter, the need for the establishment of a refinery, which will cost the government about 700 billion Kenya shillings, almost more than a third of the national budget. And I'll come to the other notifications. Kenyans rush to export Turkana oil will destabilize any serious talk with the locals. Consequences are not that far. Pause. It's time for reflection, says Emily on Twitter. And one final one here from one of our, this is Ben Mulo, of course, a tweet by you. Kenya's rush to export Turkana oil will destabilize. This is perhaps a showcase of how Ongweri_Amos is perhaps not optimistic about the future of the oil discovery, but says that if not well managed, then this can be a curse in the case of South Sudan. So those are some of your tweets. I can't sample all because of time. Need to get the sentiments of our panel equally. So I'm getting back to them, and I just want to pose this important element because we are now going beyond the borders of the country, Ben, and I'll come to you here. And it appears that then we have some specifications. I don't want, nor does any Kenyan view the country rather slipping into chaos, as was the case with South Sudan. But in terms of the international capacity and the market financially, owing that we have some debts to pay, does it take Kenya off the pricing power here because we have debts to pay, for instance, to China and to other European countries? And how about the supply power away from the country? Is that a disadvantage that we are likely to meet in the future?
I don't think it would be directly a disadvantage. If anything, actually for any lender, this is a new income stream that the government doesn't currently have. So it increases in terms of capacity to repay. That could directly impact in our credit rating globally, because this is a revenue stream that previously did not exist. But again, when you look at the mathematics that you have just taken us through there, in the long run, what was the total for the 5 years?
220 million?
US dollars.
Especially for the county,
yes.
Maximum 220 million US dollars, about 22 billion.
That's about 22 billion shillings. That math right there does not actually include the actual cost of what we are putting in to be able to raise. You know, you're giving me a gross, Kenyans are being given the gross sell price. It's like we are saying, yes, we are exporting coffee and we have made 100 billion shillings from coffee. We have not considered the actual inputs, the actual expenses we have put into that project. And still it takes me back again to the same scenario. If these are the projections that are coming from the Ministry of Petroleum, believe you me, this project does not sound to be anything near viable by any standards, by any evaluation. Because if all this effort, when you take again the 75%, if the county government is going to earn 22 billion shillings in 5 years, Mwananchi there is earning another about 10 billion.
Yes.
From the for the same duration.
Yes.
Again, there's an issue there with how much money is going to the community. How is this going to happen? Is there a cash transfer program that will be paid now? You are a resident of Turkana, so you'll be earning M-Pesa because we sold oil from your county? or what kind of infrastructure. So all these actually are areas that continue to cast aspersions in terms of the planning around the implementation of this whole project. I sincerely wish that the government could be a little more honest in terms of enlightening Kenyans that when we are generating these 100 or 200 billion shillings from this process, we have already sunk in maybe 80 billion. So the net that we are receiving, you see, the conflict will arise from this, Ayub. You go and tell the people of Turkana that the county government will receive $20 billion or 20 billion shillings in the next 5 years. Then eventually, when the overheads are removed from that math, the county government ends up receiving 3 or 4 billion shillings. That's automatically, somebody will start making noise on the ground that somebody in Nairobi is the one actually who is eating our 20 billion. So I think the element of transparency is really critical. There is really nothing worth hiding around such a noble project for this country, because it is not, when you look at even that projection, it even goes beyond the president's current term. So it only serves him right to make sure that what is in the public domain is right at this stage, because the contrary to that will be in the event chaos erupt, Kenyans will hold it against the current president. They'll be like, you are the one who brought this madness to us. You are the one who brought us this problem. We were okay. So I think it is important for them to really...
Let me just say something short.
Yes,
in terms of the 5% that goes to the community, the best practice is always to invest it in first infrastructure, education, and health. So that when you go to Turkana, you definitely find better healthcare.
A turnaround society.
Yes, yes. A turnaround society, as you said. If that doesn't happen, then there is a problem. As Ben has said, look, we need transparency in management of our natural resources. When the minister comes up and talks about that, look, the contract we've signed, we cannot put it in public. The president is promising that after the interview, he will actually share that.
Yes, which he never did.
Which he never does. Then that is a problem, and those kind of situation brings a lot of trust issues. And once you have trust issues, then there is a problem. And there's something else that I wanted to talk about, something that has not come out very strongly in terms of environmental degradation aspect of it, because this has to come out very clearly now, so that we know that after 20 years we've explored, we've got this oil, then what happens to Turkana? Does it become worse than when we found it, or it becomes better? What are the mechanisms that are put in place so that we know after 20 years, after 30 years of exploring oil from this place, it will be a better place? But the other thing also that we also have to look at is, as we speak as a country right now, we are looking at alternative energy. We are what we call clean energy. I'm happy that at least we have really invested in solar. We've also invested in wind energy. Those are good things. But today, because we're discussing about this oil and petroleum issue in Turkana, and for me, I wouldn't want to write it off now, because I see it as a pilot stage. Let's give it a few months and then come back to it. Because considering the fact that Talo Oil has really invested, in fact, they have borrowed money to invest and invest and invest. They need back that money.
Okay, given that, again, there are fears about the political climate, especially at the host community level, because that, again, has been the same scenario which played out in South Sudan, because the investor did fear because of the civil strife that started in December 2013. I'll come to that later, but come to you, Ben Mulwa here. Economically, then demand is not what it used to be, neither is the country's economy where it was 20 years ago. But again, my fear, or the fear of the economic analysts, is that neither do we have an exuberant financial market or an exuberant financial system in the country. We see the capital flight, manufacturing is on the doldrums, the economy is on the abyss, and it appears that the government then has this horse to ride on twice, which is to set up the economy, because without a proper economy, you can't undertake this initiative. And without that, again, the fear of the investor comes in. So who wants to invest in an economy that is underperforming, is not well managed, mismanaged for that matter, mishandled? So how does the government need to put the house into order?
Unfortunately, this is something that we have to state very candidly. If you look through the Jubilee tenure for the last 7 years, there has been a lot of haphazard way of doing, undertaking mega projects without taking time to critically understand their internal capacities, and more importantly, planning around sustainability, because to me sustainability is very key.
Yes.
And I'll give you several scenarios. You remember the medical equipment leasing program that to date still remains a mystery to many Kenyans. We ended up with a lot of equipment in many hospitals that we do not have the capacity to operate or to functionalize. So we still have Kenyans dying from ailments or from complications that the equipment we leased can be treated. I'll still revert to my entry point, whereby we have individuals in government in critical policy making levels who insist on looking primarily at the benefit that is coming to them at the expense of the benefit of the public. And that is where Kenyans keep losing. So even in the same sense of this particular project and about the concerns that the investor is raising and also our standing economically, in the long run, right now, the world is actually completely shifting into clean energy. As we are speaking, some of the largest car manufacturers in the world are actually holding their breath.
Yes.
Tesla is taking the world by storm with electronic cars, and they're already operational. A friend of mine actually right now in Norway drives a Tesla. It's 100% electric.
Yes.
It doesn't
Need fuel.
Doesn't. So what that means is we may be running in the opposite direction of where the world is going, where we end up with now large volumes of fossil oil or fossil fuels that the world is discarding, and then we have invested our money, we have no capacity because the money even Talo is borrowing.
Yes.
In the event, and that's why I want to believe the contracts are being kept secret, that in the event they are not able to recover their money, this money will still be paid by the treasury.
Yes.
Those are the things I want to imagine are contained in those contracts. That's why they can't afford to make them public. My take is there needs to be a little bit more transparency, as you asked about the government putting their house in order, because it doesn't really cost anything. Actually, it really raises the credibility of the government in the eyes of the public, to the extent that citizens are confident that whatever projects that we are undertaking or we are investing in are for the benefit of the people of Kenya. Kenyans need to be convinced by the same government that whatever we are doing is for their own benefit, not for the benefit of a few individuals, as we have seen with mega projects before.
You know,
Okay,
you've just talked about,
You've
just talked about the current economic situation in Kenya, and you're wondering why should the government take such a project, a big project. And for me, history is my best teacher. If you look at Venezuela before the discovery of oil, it was no country. It was a poor country, or Dubai as we know it, before the discovery of oil. Those guys were poor, and there was nothing good that was coming, or Kuwait. So what I'm saying, for me, it's this simple, that look, let's give the government a chance. Of course, we must continuously demand from the government so that they become transparent, become accountable, but let's give it a chance. So that then after maybe 5 years, then we can review. Because I don't think the current government will be there in perpetuity.
Yes.
At one point, they'll be out of power, and we'll question them. We'll take some of them to court. We'll take some of them to jail if they've messed us up.
I am taking this position, Ayub, because I want to speak for the ordinary Kenyan out there. The ordinary Kenyan is the Wanjiku out there.
Me, you, and the millions of others.
Yes, millions of others who have been taken for a ride for a long time by specific individuals. It is not everybody, by the way. It is just a few individuals who think working or serving in government is an opportunity to steal and to plunder. And from the perspective of Wanjiku, Wanjiku, believe you me, has given this government very many chances, the chances you are talking about, Anthony. We imagined that the adoption or the launch of the SGR was going to be revolutionary in terms of transporting cargo from Mombasa to wherever. It is the opposite. Now transporting cargo on the SGR. In fact, now the Kenya Railways has to start intimidating transporters that you must, and the Ministry of Transport is working in cahoots with the Kenya Railways and the Chinese to intimidate people that you must use the SGR, which currently is more expensive to ferry a 40-foot container from Mombasa than on a truck. Now, we have given you the other example of the medical leasing equipment. We have a cancer crisis in this country. Wanjiku is suffering in this country. Yet, We gave them a chance. We thought that by leasing this equipment at almost 50 billion shillings, that healthcare was going to be transformed in this country. Okay. We have not seen that. My take is we must not wait again another 5 years to see one guy from the new CS Energy that time or petroleum coming on TV and telling us, you know what, guys, we sunk in 200 or 400 billion shillings in this thing. It is not working. Okay. Now we are digging sand from the wells instead of oil. Okay. I think really Kenyans need to demand that this is addressed now before we go further than that.
Okay,
yes.
Coming to you, Anthony, then. I mean, there is also the other angle to look at it. Of course, many might label us, me, you, and Ben, yes, as the prophets of doom. But equally, this is the most important element that we can't rule out a situation, as was the case in South Sudan, that had to shelve its pre-production oil levels following the civil strife in December, which started in December 2013 and still continuing the mass human rights violations, how millions have fled to Ethiopia, Uganda and Kenya. But equally that again points to the essence of the lack of proper handling. And let me quote the minister in charge, John Munyes, who said, "We are being cautious to ensure conflict do not escalate into something else. We are exploring many ways to resolve the matter amicably." It appears that then, yes, the president did flag off that important consignment, about 200,000 barrels, but it appears that he needs to put something much better into order. And you can only be have strength abroad when you are strengthened at home. And that has been one of the key lines of Margaret Thatcher during her prime minister tenure in the United Kingdom. So how do we go about that?
If you look at my first statement was that when you're dealing with oil, there are too many interests that you have to be careful and to manage it very well. For example, if you look at South Sudan, it's something that's difficult to explain that you can sustain a war for a long time where there's no mineral that you could say that they have right now, except the oil which they're not they're basically not mining it now. And basically that means there's no money actually even to sustain war. But still, there are people who are giving the money to buy war equipment, to buy guns, yes, to buy bombs. So who are these people? And you just need to know, to check who are struggling in terms of who wants to do the mining, who wants to get the oil. Yes. And there are two big economies, the US and the Chinese. Yes. And that means they're either sponsoring the war between the two communities who are basically fighting. So that is why it is very important that all the interests are taken care of and a lot of transparency is put into place. All right. It's unfortunate.
Mentioning that, Anthony, before you continue, I just want to equally add a bit cut you short. You will continue, of course. But again, how do we cushion ourselves from that? The competing interests, the sort of the scramble and partition in the 21st century of global powers, because that has been very evident too, isn't it, in Venezuela, where President Nicolas Maduro, often seen as a darling by the Russians, the Turkish, and the other countries, but the US and the other corporate giants in the US and other parts of Europe, among them France, Britain, and Germany, have all recognized the opposition leader, that is Juan Guaido, as the president. Yet we have a legitimate president, and this appears to be faltering, further dividing a nation that was once rich under Hugo Chavez, isn't it?
So the best thing, as we've discussed it here, that make sure any contract that is signed, any obligation that you get involved, that is put into public domain and everybody knows about.
Made public.
And also the procedures of getting the oil, it is well known to everyone. So if it is a matter of tender, you can actually check that, okay, the US tendered, the Chinese tendered, the Russian tendered, and you can clearly see why we are going with Russia. Okay. It is very clear. If it is clear like that, there is always no problem. The problem comes when you start covering up things. When there is an opaque all over the thing, all over the case. Then that is where now interest start coming in. And then people prefer to buy the oil on the black market rather than on the normal market where it is demand and the supply that control the price.
Okay, Ben, let me just come and cascade down the discussion entirely at the consumer level here, because it's equally important for the taxpayer, the common man, to be up to date with what's happening. And aside from the locals, the host community in Turkana country, we live in a country where half of the population goes to one meal to bed without a meal a day.
Yes.
And this again points to perhaps a whole host of responsibility upon the shoulders of the government at a time when many Kenyans feel the brunt of an economy that has been mishandled. What does the government need to do at the consumer level to ensure that the prices at the pump are fair, there's no pinching, and equally energy at homes and the prices to be reduced? Just today, the LPG gas, we had a business story. The government said no longer, you can't handle that without an authority from the Energy Regulatory Authority.
On the element of licensing, I think that is critical because that is the safety of the people of Kenya. That is that is not negotiable in my view. And even the ordinary vendors, even in the slums and in rural areas, must agree to be regulated because LPG is very dangerous if mismanaged or mishandled. But now when you come to the issue of pricing at the pump, it is very difficult to discuss fair pricing or justice for Wanjiku at the pump and the government in the same sentence. Reason is, I'll give you specifics. Like today, look at the actual breakdown of how much refined oil lands at Mombasa and how much the same government that is supposed to be protecting Wanjiku taxes on a liter of petrol. Right now we are buying a liter of petrol at 112 shillings. Out of the 112 shillings, about 52–54% of that price is actually taxes. So the problem is not actually the actual cost of oil or the actual cost of petroleum or kerosene. The problem is the government. So it becomes difficult to expect the same government again to work against itself and start defending Wanjiku. That's why perhaps in the long run we may need also to critically evaluate the kind of leadership we have in place. Secondly, there is the issue of kerosene, because this is actually an energy source for very many families in this country. You remember, by some argument that came from Rotich, formerly at the Treasury, he came up with a very ridiculous justification as to why he had to push the kerosene prices up. He insisted that people are using kerosene to adulterate diesel. Now, there are more consumers of kerosene in this country than diesel consumers. So to me that didn't make any logic. The idea was actually to continue punishing ordinary mwananchi while the Energy Regulatory Commission is not being transparent in terms of actually how much or why do they have to keep pushing the prices of kerosene this high. And in the long run, we have again to start now critically evaluating the pricing strategy that is adopted by the government. Because initially we thought salvation would come when prices were controlled. You remember initially it was a free market. Now it has even become worse than it was when it was a free market. So in the long run, actually, we need to critically, even the people out here, need to critically take time to understand that they have a responsibility in the caliber of leadership we are putting in place, and their responsibility also as citizens. That's why we must demand for these contracts to be made public right now, so that the people of Kenya can even petition the whole world, even the OPEC countries and whoever needs to be. If this contract does not make sense, let's stop this thing right now. We are fine without the oil. Let's continue importing it from the UAE.
Anthony, then coming to you here about, let me talk about the another important angle to it, which is equally important for our viewers to understand, which is and the economic diversification point here. And countries such as Saudi Arabia, the biggest producer, thousands of barrels of oil per day, is looking at another venture in which the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, I don't want to talk about the sketchy human rights records that he has, which includes, of course, the gruesome murder of Jamal Khashoggi at its embassy in Istanbul. But is this the point, perhaps, that we need to also cut on other aspects in terms of, say, agriculture, where we have seen at some point politicians telling the maize farmers to venture into avocado? And considering that, can it refill, can the oil venture, the oil business, say by 2022, may God grant us to be alive by then, allow us feel the always budget deficit that we have after every financial years when we put our books together? Is this the savior point for us, the guarantor, perhaps, for Kenya's economy?
Basically, when running a country economically, you constantly must look at options and ways of getting revenue. And I'm very happy with the governments in Dubai, whereby they're constantly looking at options of getting money. For example, you know, right now Dubai is never considered as a giant in oil production, but they're actually a tourist destination. We Kenyans, we've always been known to basically be agricultural country where that is the main thing. But I'm so happy that even as a country right now, we are trying but not trying as much. I was very happy with what Governor Joho said in Mombasa when they were launching this, when we decided to start exporting the oil that we had. And he said something very interesting that, look, let's try and build as much as it's costly, our refinery, even if it is refurbishing it, and then have various products from petroleum, like bitumen, then that will create more employment. That is how you start diversifying economy. Or what the president is constantly saying, that, look, let's then turn Kenya to be a service industry, whereby we are known to, for example, banking. We are known for, let's say, programming. Just like Singapore has no mineral, but they are leading in all sorts of service industry. So those are things that now constantly we start having to look at.
Okay, Anthony and Ben, can we end it at that point then? I do. Thank you for coming on board.
Thank you
I'm
so
told
much.
to get out of the set. But equally, a worthy, important discussion that is timely and points to a better future economically for Kenya if well handled. Thank you so much, Ben Mulwa, governance expert. Anthony Odhiambo, economist, and thank you to you too for watching the program. Always 3 ways to get in touch with us. On Facebook, that we are at facebook.com/Ebru Television Kenya. On YouTube at Ebru TV Kenya, and of course online at www.ebrutv.co.ke. On Twitter, we are at Ebru TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdikadir, at Ben Mulwa, and at Anthony Odhiambo. Gentlemen, I do appreciate your time.
Thank you so
Kabata
much.
Lizzie, my director, thank you. And Shadrach, of course, the cameraman, Wycliffe, to the gentlemen who have made this broadcast a wonderful outcome. I do thank you. And of course to you too. We'll see you next week by the grace of God on Thursday for another topic, another important discussion, and different set of guests, of course. Till then, bye-bye.